So let's talk about the state of prosecutions in the country. And we know that we have seen like the invigorated fight against corruption, right? Since the appointment of the new DPP, and even before that with the previous DPP, Keria Kotobiko, with the appointment of the new DPP, with the appointment of a new boss at the EACC, with the appointment of a new boss at the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, and them working together as a multi-agency task force and deciding that we want to fight corruption. So what have we seen since then? We have seen some improvement in terms of the number of prosecutions started. We have seen also some improvement in the number of prosecutions concluded. We have seen the number of cases jump. So just to give a brief, the Director of Public Prosecutions, Mr. Noordin Haji, presented a report, and he presented it to the President the other day. And in that report, he was detailing the kind of work that they've done since 2017, looking at the year 2017, 2018, and 2019, 2020. That's by June this year. Conviction rates. 2017, 2018, it was at 90.2% of the cases taken to court went into conviction. 92.5% is the conviction rate in the year 2019-2020. That's a jump of a whole 2%. In corruption cases alone, we saw 37.4% conviction rate in 2018, and in the first half of 2020, 63.16%. That's a good rate in terms of the jump in corruption conviction rates. The focus has been on high-profile and high-impact cases. This is the focus that we were told by the DPP when we interviewed him here. We also told the same is the focus by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. We are investigating corruption, and we go for high-profile, high-impact. Go for this one case that will send shockwaves down the spine of many others. Specialized thematic divisions were established by the DPP. There were recovery of proceeds according to the report. And then they also adopted the use of experts, in deciding now we are going to bring in an expert in, for example, matters of financial analyst, bring in an expert so that this expert can help us in putting together the case. So as we go to court to present our case, strong case. Sounds like, some good progress has been made.
It is actually very good progress when you consider what they purposed to do. But perhaps what we should focus on is what hinders them from probably achieving that 100% mark, because the aim is to get to 100%.
Yep.
What is it that prevents them from actually doing this? Is it issues within or among themselves? Is it external issues? Is it an issue of resources that are inadequate? What is it? Because they clearly did not get to 100%. And they're not moving as fast as they had purposed. So something must be happening, because in terms of effort, you only need to open any newspaper or listen to the news. There's always some effort being made in this fight against corruption. And unfortunately, it's just that the fight. The conclusions are not many. And we would very much like for the conclusions to be many.
Sure, I think that's the cry. That's the cry for many Kenyans, that you want to see that knockout punch. And if we talk about these convictions then standing as deterrents, people can enjoy their lives while these cases are in court. But until and unless you see when it's been flattened and that somebody is going to jail because of what has happened, to me, the deterrent doesn't stand. Until that happens, it doesn't really serve as a deterrent to anybody else who might have their hands in the cookie jar. Because they would look at it and say, okay, well, I could live a very good part of my life enjoying the proceeds of whatever it is that I'm going to do. This is what it's going to be. Even with the rulings that have come and say, wrap up these things within 2 years. The practice previously has been, and as we see, that people enjoy their lives out there while these cases are in court. But then you see a conviction, and somebody from that conviction goes into jail and also then has to pay a fine. That is, I think, is what would drop the hammer.
You see, the conversation with the DPP makes sense. And it is correct that the president should be reported to have said what he is reported to have said. However, the DPP doesn't make the final decision. This conversation also ought to be had with those who make these decisions, because when they've done due diligence, they take these matters to another body within our structure. And that body actually have the final say on these matters. This conversation also ought to be had with them. And we also need to understand why it is their processes don't move as quickly as we think and hope they would move, and what it is that prevents them from doing what they're supposed to do as well as we expect them to do it.
The issue of capacity and everything else.
Whatever else, because they would be best placed to explain to us why it is they don't do these things. Because we see the DPP and what they do, and we see them moving, gets to court.
The issue that, and many times even the EACC boss, Twali Mbarak, has told us, case goes to court, case takes an average of 10 years, and this is a corruption case. 10 years to conclude. And you're wondering, so why is it taking so long? Look at the Waluka case. How long has it taken to conclude? By the time you're getting to conclusion, so when you're saying that you have, for example, this year, between 2018 and 2020, you have had 238 cases concluded. Those 238 cases are cases that even were started before 2018, some of them before 2008, right? And that's when they were just getting concluded in these last 2 years, 238 cases. Good thing, but then why does it take so long? Is it due process? Is it what is expected that, because we are pursuing justice, we shall not rush it so that we ensure that we get everything that we ought to get? But also, are you denying justice to the person who's being wrongfully accused, who believes that they've been wrongfully charged with an offense? As far as as long as the case is in court, everybody says that you're a suspect. Everybody says that you are
Guilty
you are going through a case in court.
We in Kenya, do we say that we say in our minds you're guilty?
Yeah.
We're just waiting for the courts to determine what we already know.
In fact, you're just waiting for the punishment, what it will be. The thought of it being innocent doesn't actually come into people's minds.
No.
By virtue of the fact that there's a charge against you and then you're taken to court and then whatever trial process has begun. It's a matter of waiting to see what the sentence
innocent,
will
why
be.
are you in court?
Exactly. You can't be in court and you're innocent. That's the mindset.
But think about it. Also of significance, if you think about this. We've had very many courts, specific and special courts set up to deal with many issues. If this matter is of such grave importance, surely, should they not have been, not just a court, but a robust court, or if not, legislate something that determines, okay, this has been done, so that we know that from beginning to start, the longest time this thing is going to take is this. But so long as we're just talking about cases being rushed and specific action not being taken to ensure that these things, with all the bodies that work around this, is done, it's just going to be just that talk.
There was talk of, remember the miscellaneous amendment bill that was going to Parliament, which was then withdrawn because the agencies started fighting. The EACC, the DPP, the DCI, they started fighting on who should have what say
and what powers,
and what powers they have. But some of those proposals included, like saying that a corruption case should take 2 years, maximum 2 years from beginning to start, as City said, right? 2 years to conclude it. This proposal is also contained in a new BBI report. It says, have 2 years, corruption cases are dispensed with. This, I think, would be a good thing because in some cases as well, there are those who accuse the prosecutors and the investigators of rushing to court to hit the headlines, and yet then they start working backwards to complete a case, to build up a case against you. Cases that started and then they don't move as much. So, for example, there are cases, NYS 1, NYS 2, we still have those cases, they're somewhere. We have cases that we have seen people being arrested and rushed to court. For example, in the former Auditor General's office, was it Auditor General? Yes, where some officers were arrested, were taken to court, corruption allegations, corruption charges. What's the nature of that case? Has it started? Has it moved anywhere? Who knows? And there are those who feel, you know what? So sometimes you're just rushing. It's finalized. It's taken to court. And then do we have is the prosecution ready? In fact, if I remember, I don't remember which judges were this, but there are some judges who also pointed the same finger at the prosecution and told them, if you're starting a case here and you're not ready, please don't bring it. We start this case, there's no adjournment by prosecution. It's we start, we move. Go. Don't come and adjourn and say, you know what, our witness is not available. Get all your ducks in a row and then come to my court.
But what I often wonder when I hear of this, because I ask myself, is it that they are reacting to pressure that they must present cases in court, or is it with full knowledge of what the law states and what the law is, they deliberately pull this stunt so that the case can be thrown out. Because you take it to court and there isn't sufficient evidence, that case is finished.
It's
done.
finished.
Yeah.
It
It's
goes.
done.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah.
So who would be the one? I mean, so now you bring in a case, insufficient evidence. Who would, as the prosecutor, looking for the chance to throw away this case? Essentially, you would bring in insufficient evidence.
I'm saying
That's
that
a big one.
discussion has to be brought in.
Yeah.
because
Yeah, it's a
There are
big one.
those that actually also they're throwing the same. That there are very many cases that maybe have been taken to court where the entire end game is played out. We're gonna take this to court, and it should be thrown out.
It is planned and
It
determined.
reeks of collusion.
Yes,
It is
Yeah.
It is collusion.
Yeah, that's what it is.
So
It's
it
a
doesn't
duck.
hint.
This is a full duck.
Yeah.
So, you see, for the longest time, these are discussions that have taken place, and these are the discussions that have given our court system a bad name. Because it falls under their purview. All these things are done. And then, remember, there was this push by the officers, the ODPP, to ensure that the prosecutors were actually people who were trained in law. Previously, it was said that because many of them were also police persons, one, they were cited conflict of interest, they were cited, many things were cited, but they said, look, let's just have people who are lawyers doing this work. The assumption being that due diligence would be done. Remember when you had police prosecutors, there was logic behind it.
Yeah.
Because they are the ones who conducted the investigation. They understood some of these prosecutorial factors that relate to the cases. However, that's a debate for another day. The truth of the matter is that there are too many things at play in this particular system. So you're never really sure what it is you're dealing with. But what is also certain is that we will not lack someone to blame.
That's for
We'll
sure.
have someone. Let's bring in the Director of Public Prosecutions, Noordin Haji. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you. Welcome
Yeah.
to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much.
And just been discussing the report that you presented and that you produced of the work that you've done since 2017 to date. I think up to June 2020, right? And looking at what we are looking at, the highlights, the key highlights of these conviction rates jumping from 90.2% in 2017 to 92.5% in 2020, and in those in corruption jumping from 37.4% to 63.16%. That's a good jump. The question, though, that C.T. Muga raised after hearing this is, so how do you explain the 37% that you did not get the conviction rate for? I'm sure as an ODPP, when you start a case, you're going there fully confident that you're going to get a conviction.
Yeah. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Once again.
Good morning.
Yeah. Well, the question actually should be, how did we achieve the 63? But now you're asking, why do we have that difference or shortfall? There is quite a number of factors for that, and to be frank, and I'm just being very frank, and I've submitted this document so that the public can appraise us in a very frank manner. Of course, there are challenges that we have in court. Some could be attributed to issues of us having lost the cases, that is acquittal. Some is attributed to the fact that some of the cases are not concluded yet, and once they're concluded, then the percentage will definitely change, and many other factors that could contribute to that, including maybe withdrawals of cases where we found that either the evidence that was initially tabled to us has changed because of a number of factors, including the fact we always review cases even when they're in court. And when new evidence comes in, we have to take that into consideration. So there is quite a number of factors to explain the difference or the shortfall, why we can't get 100%. That should be my answer. But in any situation, and if you are to go to any jurisdiction, it is not possible to get 100%. The reason being, this is a process, and as I've said over and over, it's a sieving process. That's why we have the complainant who goes to complain to the investigator.
Yep.
Then the investigator investigates to establish whether he thinks there is evidence. And that's a sieving process, because then if we were to take it from the complainant and just take it to court, you are bound to fail. Once the investigator completes, then they forward it to the prosecutor, who then sees further whether that file has evidence or not. And again, the prosecutor then presents it to court, where you get a further refinement and sieving process that now looks at whether the evidence is there or not. And it is a process. You will hear sometimes the investigators complaining that the prosecutor has refused to charge.
Yep.
It is the same as courts saying, prosecutor, bona prosecutor, you don't have the evidence.
Yep.
And you've lost in court. So it is a process, and it is the same thing where you will have the complainant complaining that the investigator has refused to investigate this because he feels there is no evidence or there's nothing to investigate. So it is a process, and that's why the Constitution has designed it that way, and that's why most jurisdictions all over the world, in fact all, have designed it that way. It's supposed to refine the process as you go, because here what we are doing is taking away a person's civil liberty, and it's a very serious decision to make. And that's why we have all these stages that we have to go through.
Okay. But looking at benchmarking yourselves against other prosecutors in the world, especially in, let's say, cases against corruption, 63...
I can assure you 63% is very good, above, average. And you can do your own...
And what would the average be?
Well, it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but 50% and above is very good.
Okay.
Of course, the question will be what what kind of cases are you then winning? It's slow in Kenya. We are taking time. A lot of the cases, Kenyans will feel that maybe it is the so-called small fishes or medium fishes, not the big fishes.
Yeah.
But I think we are coming to that.
Mr. Haji, you talked about being extremely careful, because essentially what's happening here with this process is taking away a person's civil liberty. So you have to be extremely cautious in the process as to how you go to this. At the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, you're looking at an individual who potentially may have taken away funds that would have fueled development in a country, for example. Is that taken into consideration when this process is taking place as well?
Yes, and if you look at how we've presented our cases and how we have argued on the kind of bail that we as prosecutors feel if it was to be given, or our arguments against bail and allowing these individuals back, you will understand that we have taken that into consideration. At the end of it, constitutionally, even the accused has a right. And the mantra is, you're innocent until proven guilty. And the onus is on us to prove that you're guilty and to present evidence beyond reasonable doubt. That's, basic. So even the accused has a right, just like the victim. But it is when we go to court and present our arguments, especially during plea, that then you will understand the seriousness that we take on that offense. And I think if you look at most, or all actually, that we've brought since I took office, we have argued for very high bail. In fact, the first case that we brought, NYS, the bail was very high, that individuals and lawyers and everybody complained, and they had to go to the High Court for it to be reviewed lower. So when we present, we take this very seriously, and our arguments are tabled in such a manner that we ensure that person is curtailed. And you see the fight that we are having with governors. The other day, you saw what they've written before. They've said that they need to be given immunity, basically because since 2018, we've insisted that they have to step aside and they cannot go back to office and they cannot continue with business as usual. They're not happy. They've taken us to court to challenge that continuously. We've gone all the way to the Supreme Court. They have gone, the Council of Governors have gone again to the Constitutional Court because we have tightened the noose around them. And that shows the seriousness that we take with this. If you look at the Waluke case, for example, the highest, fine ever in Kenya when it comes to corruption cases, over 2 billion. And cumulatively, the individuals are going to serve 163 years in incarceration. But then again, they've rushed to the High Court. And because of the Constitution, you're allowed to do that. They have appealed. And one of them is out there, in Parliament, being given,
standing ovation almost.
Yes,
hero's welcome.
So I think these are some of the challenges that you face, and as we continue the conversation, you'll be explaining to us some of the challenges that you face, but also we want to put you to task on some of the work that you do as well. As you said,
sure. And that's why we're here, and that's why we presented the report, so that Kenyans can appraise it.
Good. We are speaking with the Director of Public Prosecutions, Noordin Haji, released a report on the performance of the ODPP since 2017 to date. And that's what we are looking at. We're looking at the challenges, we're looking at the successes, and we're also looking at where it is that he would require much support from the public and from the government and from the other agencies.
In the vision, if I were to take an excerpt from this report, there was a vision that was envisioned by this office. And one of the things they wanted to do was to enhance accountability, transparency, and public confidence. Now, what I would like Mr. Haji to perhaps explain to us and explain to our listeners is, how exactly would this be manifest to the public? How would the public understand that accountability is being enhanced? What would they need to see for them to understand that accountability is being enhanced, that transparency is being enhanced, but more importantly, public confidence? What do the public need to see?
Well, one is the submission of this report. Maybe I can ask you, when was the last time a independent commission has submitted a report to be reviewed? You can let me know. But this is one of the way of ensuring that there's accountability. Another way that ODPP has done is to reach out to the public. We've had a lot of public outreach. We have a complaints and compliments division. We have a whole department of inspectorate quality and compliance, and it is here that all this falls down and deals with the public. I'm not saying that we are perfect. We are not, but we're striving to be as perfect as possible. I think another way that we have done this is through continuous appraisal of our decisions to the public, so that they understand how we've arrived at certain decisions, especially on these corruption cases, because for us, it is a priority which we feel every individual, every Kenyan needs to understand why we've made a certain decision and how we've arrived at it. We've come up with guidelines like the decision to charge, which is out there, and we've shared it widely, where Kenyans can go and refer and even challenge the prosecutor on how they've reached at a decision, because it is very clear and it is outlined very clearly how one should reach at a certain decision. And it is explained, what right a victim has, what right an accused has, because there's been very many instances where individuals have complained that the decisions we've made were not independent, or they were influenced, or they were malicious. And it is very clear how one arrives, and if an individual in Kenya wants to challenge, then the decision, the guideline on the decision to charge is very clear on the steps that should have been taken. So we have tried as much as possible to open ourselves. People also have the right to information when individuals ask. We have shared very openly, as is required under the Constitution. And I think we have tried our best to enhance that accountability, that transparency, and the openness that the public has, or the right that the public has to even audit us. If you look at the report, we've attached the various audit, reports that were done by the Auditor General for the public to look at and evaluate.
I have found this report delightful myself. There's one aspect that actually really interests me and gripped my attention. That is the part where you're talking about the future and you talk about forecasting.
Yes.
Looking at
so this
trends.
Is a very,
yes.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Very important. So yeah, it's a very important, forecasting is a very important tool to make sure that we're prepared and to make sure that we formulate policies that are, ahead of their time and, putting measures in place to ensure that Kenyans are safeguarded and that we are prepared to deal with a lot of the new emerging crimes. For example, like cybercrime, cyberbullying, or even things like cryptocurrencies and how certain individuals, and it's happening today, that certain individuals who are involved in corruption cases have converted some of their money into cryptocurrencies that are hidden, and it's very hard to be able to audit and trace. So we are building that capacity in Kenya to ensure that we are able to then trace this crime.
If
So
I
we
were
are
to
trying
bring
prepare ourselves.
this subject of forecasting something simple and mundane which we're accustomed to, procurement. Because every time all government agencies have budgetary considerations, and it's from these considerations and the process of procurement that follows thereafter that we see a lot of our crimes. How would this particular process of forecasting forestall this and ensure, forget arresting and prosecuting, that it doesn't actually happen, if that is indeed something that can be done?
It's not in our purview, unfortunately. Maybe it is something that they can borrow in terms of using forecasting to be able to see. It's I can't say it's 100% accurate, but you can be able to tell through forecasting that you've budgeted for this amount. This is what, as you rightly put it, this is what we're going to procure, and what are the likely crimes that are going to occur there. But that will have to be done by the different and individual ministries, and then also maybe by the investigators, because we don't investigate, and it is not in our, it's not our mandate. We don't have those powers. Ours is to wait for a file that has been investigated and is presented to us, the investigators, and to make a decision whether there is a case or not. But I think these are things that the government, probably you can ask the wider government departments, maybe they're using that and they're doing it.
Actually, why I ask this is because one of the things you also mentioned is that you focus to pursue networking, I assume, with other agencies that complement the work that you do. So then comes my question. How well does this networking work? Is it working well? Does it have pitfalls? Does it have challenges? Because if indeed, for instance, you're working well with the DCI, who we know have investigative powers, or you're working with the Anti-Corruption Commission, then surely an idea such as this one can be bought and can be used to achieve the same ends that you are trying to achieve.
Of course, they definitely also use it. I believe that the best we can do as ODPP is share that information and that data, and we've been doing that where it is necessary. But in terms of, I think you were asking about collaboration and
yes,
coordination and cooperation.
Yes,
that is happening every day, day in, day out. Whenever files are presented, we have teams that sit down and review them jointly. And where a prosecutor feels that more investigations need to be done, we make sure that we present the reasons why and where they should be focused on, and we work together. I've said this many times. Differences are likely to occur, but that doesn't mean that the work stops. Interpretations differ, are different from one person to the other, but that doesn't mean the work is told. So, like in any relationship, even when you're married, mwezi kubaliana kila siku. But at the end of the day, you're in the same house, you're working together and delivering for Kenyans, and that's what we've been doing.
The president recently encouraged, as you handed a couple of days, encouraged for a speedy wrap-up of some of these cases that are currently on the table. So that bringing in the element of time, which when we talk about public confidence for Kenyans are also, one, it could be baying for blood or asking that these things be wrapped up, whereas an individual has been able to or allegedly steal public funds, for example, but they still seem to enjoy the time to enjoy these funds or to enjoy the proceeds of this alleged theft. So here is an encouragement to wrap these things up quickly. We've seen also that it's 2 years to wrap up some of these cases, at least within that 24-month period. But then again, the element of time keeps playing out here. And every time Kenyans are asking, why is this taking so long? It is the element that continues to play out in these cases, Mr. Haji. And so what, in terms of instilling or renewing public confidence that work is actually being done, the time factor is one that cannot be ignored. How,
of course,
if a case took 10 years, for example, to get a decision, how then, using the same elements, will it be done in 2 years? Again, to instill that public confidence.
Okay, I've said this severally. We've tried to put measures in place, especially in the last 2 years, as NCAJ, the National Council on Administration of Justice, that is chaired by the Chief Justice. What we've done, in essence, is increase the number of prosecutors that prosecute corruption cases. Taking into consideration that as ODPP, we deal with all cases, and I've always said this, from stealing chicken, witchcraft, to this complex corruption cases. Yeah, but we've still managed to place priority on corruption. What the CJ has done is increase the number of judges and magistrates in the anti-corruption cases, court. But still, as the way the judiciary is designed, we have diaries, we have dates that you have to put, and then we have over 300 cases that these 16 judges have to listen to. We have talked to the Chief Justice to see if we can increase this maybe to 30 judges, so that we reduce the burden on the judges in listening to the cases, and I think the judiciary is working towards that. But time factor, as you said, is very important, and we've tried as much as possible to push. This year, we had forecasted that we were going to deliver 3 or 4 major cases in terms of conviction, and Waluke was one of it. And if you look at Waluke, we were able to finish within about 1 year and 7 months, less than 2 years. But then COVID came. The courts had to be closed for almost 3 to 4 months. And even when we came in, we had to prioritize cases. We could not have all these cases coming in as usual. And then we had technical problems. Each institution had to work on digitizing their processes. As ODPP, we worked on that. The judiciary worked on that. And that's how they came up with their own e-filing system. And we've come with our Wadilifu system that is linked to the judiciary. There's still small teething problems here and there because it's a new system. We are upgrading them. We are continuously ensuring that they're effective and efficient.
Yeah.
And this will enhance, and it will also lessen the time, because traditionally what we were required is to present files upon files of data to court and to the accused, and they had to flick through that, and it was not user friendly. And in the COVID period, nobody wanted to handle those files because they didn't know where it was coming from. So, in a way, we were forced to modernize our systems, and now the courts are comfortable with electronic disclosure, for example, that we're presenting to court. And all this will lessen the time for the courts to be able to deal with them. The judiciary is also modernizing the courts so that the judge is not forced to sit down and always write. He's not even looking at the individuals to look at their demeanor and all that, because that is part of the judgment that should sum up your decision at the end of it. They're coming up with systems that will record this automatically and then lessen the time and allow us to move much faster. It's an important factor, but we are trying to deal with it.
As those improvements are happening, Bana DPP, 2 years ago during the corruption conference, one of the challenges that the Chief Justice David Maraga gave to you as the DPP was how you're presenting the cases to court. He was talking, for example, about the NYS cases. One case, very many accused in the same case, and then you're going to have very many lawyers. So it's definitely going to take time to just go through the proceedings of the cases. Have you improved on that, or have you changed your tack?
We have improved on that, but the way the crime in Kenya is when it comes to corruption is different from how, say, the Europeans do their corruption cases. In Europe, they try and reduce the net as much as possible in terms of who they involve in the crime. Because it's a very shameful thing. Lakini hapa kwetu,
it's communal.
You try and loop in as many people as possible. Your clansmen, unajua huyu mwingine unaona huyu nikikosa kumpatia atanistaki, So that chain is so huge. Where do you break it? And if you break it and leave one person, utaambia uliwacha huyu kwa ajili huyu ni kabila yako ama huyu ni kabila fulani. And then it impacts on the evidence that you want to present in court. Because then if you're asked, why didn't you charge this individual? We as prosecutors can be accused of favoring, and we must have an excuse why. Either we've entered into a plea bargain, or they've offered evidence that is irrefutable, and we have to use it. They've entered into some agreement with us. So when you approach these people and they say, no, we don't want to enter into plea bargaining, you tell them, okay, fine. Then the option is we're going to charge you. Think about it. And if you look at NYS, you will see that we released about 16 or 17 of them who entered into plea bargaining agreements because they realized that would be a better option than to, and they were just, watu wa mkono who are asked to, do this, do that, But then now they will be able to go to court and say, yes, we did this, but this big fish is the one who directed us. And then if we're asked by court, we can say, yes, we did not charge because this person gave us the evidence, and this is the agreement that we entered into before court. And that's the reason. So you must understand, and I think this will change over time when Kenyans will understand, I don't want to be part of this. And when an individual will understand, if I want to do corruption, I have to reduce the net, then you will see a difference in terms of how we present cases.
Mr. Haji,
but increasingly Kenyans seem to understand. And when we are charging, they come up and say, we want to enter into a plea bargaining agreement. And that is happening.
That's wonderful progress. Did I hear you say that now the issue of digital disclosure of evidence is actually being accepted in our courts?
Yes, right. Because of the e-filing system, which is very good for us.
Excellent. Now, alongside that, part of your proposed strategic actions was employing people who are very research-oriented in various disciplines and fields.
Yes.
And you also suggested that you want to collaborate with institutions of higher learning in this. How far has that gone?
Well, in the last 1 year, I think we've already, with the approval of Treasury, employed 15 researchers. We have retained experts in procurement who are working with us at the ODPP. We have reached out to institutions like Strathmore, and we're working with them through the Prosecution Training Institute. We have reached out to lawyers with, for example, international organizations like Lawyers Without Borders, who are helping us. I think University of Loyola from the US is going to undertake research with us. So we've been busy working with a lot of institutions, not only in Kenya, but the world over.
Mr. Haji, do you have to looking at, I mean, obviously what is on the table is huge work that has to be done. However, issues of a kink in the system that is supposed to be fighting this corruption at the same time come up. Do you still, we've looked at issues of corruption within the judiciary, corruption within the system itself, which is supposed to be fighting this corruption. So how are you dealing with cases that would come up, and then you have to then deal with the system fighting itself or wanting to eat itself at the same time? How do you deal with that? Because again, if we're looking at public confidence, a lot of Kenyans will say, well, okay, well, there might be corrupt individuals in there who might be covering up for these individuals at the same time. How do you deal with that?
Well, that's very, it's a very difficult thing, and I must confess that it's something that discourages and impacts on the morale of the prosecutors and even the investigators, and it continuously is happening, even today, even in some of these cases that we are dealing with. Prosecutors, including myself, we have been threatened, we've been coerced, we've been bullied. All manners of things have happened just to ensure that the cases do not proceed well and fail. But we've tried our best to keep on course, despite that. And one of the biggest challenges is, of course, even before you make a decision, sometimes when a prosecutor says this file does not have sufficient evidence or not reach a certain threshold, then accusations are thrown all over that the individual has been compromised. And when you look at the file, you can see very well that it is set up, as you had said when I came in, it has been set up to fail. So as ODPP, we've become very strict with that, and I have become very clear to all investigative authorities that we should not allow files that are weak and do not have evidence. And you can jump up the sky and down. That is our position.
All right.
You don't have the evidence, we are not going to present it in court. You have the evidence, we will present it, and we will prosecute it as it should.
So by the time we are seeing that it's in the public, that there's a charge, for example, by the time your signature is on something to say that we are going to go ahead and charge, so this, without a doubt, is watertight.
Yes, as far as we are concerned. The judiciary is another story. They will listen to it. There may be technicalities and all that can make the case fail, but we try and cover ourselves as much as possible in relation to making that decision to charge. And we've been very clear, whether it is COVID offenses or human rights abuses or whatever case that we are being presented with. And that's why we have the decision to charge, so that the prosecutor understands what he needs to look for, the public understands what the prosecutor is looking for, and the investigator also understands this is what we will go through before a decision to charge is made.
Well, DPP, as we come to the conclusion of this conversation this morning, 3 or so years down the road in office. You have a couple of more years to go if you look at your 8-year tenure. What has been your biggest frustration so far?
Of course, like any other Kenyan, my biggest frustration is the fact that we have not brought, as much conversions as we have or as we desire. I know, and this is one thing that we are very cognizant of as the ODPP. We should not play to the gallery, but once we present a case, we are anxious to ensure that we deliver a conviction. And we are working towards that. And I think you will see more convictions from December, January, moving forward, considering that this COVID pandemic has really had a negative impact on the criminal justice system.
All right. Now, I have to throw this one in because we have governors whom you've taken to court and others who are holding office. They've been barred from accessing office, but they're still discharging the duties of your office. What do you feel about that?
Very frustrated, because we go back to the courts and we raise these issues, and it's not very clear how. It looks like it's not very clear how they should discharge the Mumbigugi ruling. But we're always out there trying to ensure that they don't interfere with the cases. But it has been very frustrating. We have tried as much as possible all over to ensure that it is enforced as it should be. However, the governors are employing all manners of tricks to ensure that they're still, doing whatever they want to do in office. And sometimes, we have to balance. Do we start babysitting this governor, or do we look for other cases to bring forward and prosecute? So the investigators are really trying their best. But then at the end of it, we are looking for a system whereby we can be able to continuously monitor and ensure that when they step aside, they are not meddling with the offices that they hold.
Asante sana. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Okay, go ahead.
Hopefully the BBI will bring this out very clearly, so that as a governor, because you're both a politician and also holding an executive office, that once you're charged, you step aside, like all other public servants, like permanent secretaries, etc., until the case is concluded. And we hope we will be able to achieve that with these new reviews of the laws.
Well, if we go with the kind of negotiations that they're already coming up with, you may actually get
might be very
exact
difficult.
opposite of that.
Yeah, and the letters that they're writing. So, but Kenyans have to just be firm. At the end of it, it's your vote that will decide that referendum. On that question, we have to be very clear.
All right.
Absolutely.
Asante sana Noordin Haji, the Director of Public Prosecutions, for speaking to us, and we hope to have another conversation again with you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.